But it's with great pleasure that I'm here to talk about a topic that can be quite complex, and I'll make every effort to boil it down to simple ideas so that we all can understand and enjoy. This is my picture 42 years ago when I was conceived. It's a long time. So again, we're going to talk about reincarnation and planning to reincarnate. Okay, good. So we're going to use naturally, the Spirit's book as the main basis. That's our primary source. For those of you who are new to Spiritism, the Spirit's book is kind of the foundational book, right? That brings the basics of Spiritism in a very easy question and answer format. And we are using chapter 4 and chapter 7, as you can see, questions 166 to 170 and 330 to 360. Again, Kardec and the Spirits, they make it very simple to understand the need to reincarnate or to come back to life, and what are the general circumstances in which we come back to life and why we do, and the choices we have or don't have. But it's André Luiz and Divaldo Franco who expand those exact ideas, giving us accounts of the afterlife. And André Luiz especially dedicated many books, I don't know how many, maybe 16 books, that again give us in great detail the accounts of what happens in the afterlife. I mean, André Luiz was a doctor. Those of you who watched Nosso Lar can have more of a pictorial view of how the afterlife is portrayed. And there are many cases that are included in those books, and we're going to use a little bit of Missionaries of the Light, where there is a case of a spirit who is going to reincarnate. So we're going to tell a little story. So it's easier to illustrate with stories. And same thing, we're going to use the Entre Dois Mundos. I don't know if there is a version in English, Between Two Worlds, I guess.
Yeah, it's been translated.
It's been translated. So, so again, Missionários da Luz is written by Chico Xavier through the accounts of André Luiz, the Spirit. And Entre Dois Mundos, it's written by Divaldo Franco, by the Spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. And again, what's that?
No, it's the one from André Luiz is being translated, not this one.
I think Missionaries of the Light is already translated, right?
It's already translated,
yeah.
Yes.
I think, yeah, this one is the one being translated, right?
Yes.
I thought. Well, anyways, I'm also giving credit to my good friend Joan Korngold, Jussara Korngold's husband. Some of you know them because I copied a few slides, so I'm always applying the Lavoisier rule. Nothing gets lost, always transformed. So we learn in school, and I have an aspiring biologist here, sitting here, my daughter Gabriela. So she can confirm that in school we are taught that this is how life comes about, right? So there's an egg that is fertilized, and then we are born. The spiritual teachings give us a different view of what happens. And this, what we see in the material world is just a very narrow slice of what actually happens. And there's a great deal of preparation and purpose. And this is where we're going to spend most of our time today. So again, why reincarnate and why plan? The Spirits tell us again that we must reincarnate to progress. Kardec is very insistent. Those of you who have read the works of Kardec, he borders being stubborn in some of the questions because he repeats the questions over and over and over and over again. And sometimes you can feel the impatience of the Spirits when they are answering, say, we already told you. This is obvious. But that's his method, to really test and try to understand the answer. So in chapter 7, if you read, you can feel that, because he's really trying to understand, why do we need to reincarnate? He says, if there is a spiritual life, why can't we progress in the spiritual life? Why do we have to come back? And the Spirits are very clear. We only truly progress at this stage in our spiritual evolution through reincarnation. It's a concept sometimes difficult to grasp, because what it does basically, and if you read a lot, you see the nuances, is you can learn a lot as a spirit. You can learn and you can say, okay, I got it, I'm sure I can do this, I can be humble. I mean, all the great things that Anna read for us, you know, we can be detached from matter, we can do this. We learn as a spirit and we say, I got it, I'm gonna do it. But then the real task comes when we have to reincarnate, because one of the things that happens during reincarnation is we forget. That is the period of memory erasure, or you know, our memory is erased, and we still keep a sense of objective. It's still in us. It doesn't go away. We can tell by our tendencies. We can tell by the things we feel we must do. Those are our unfinished businesses. But we have an additional obstacle, which is we don't really. I mean, we don't come with a you know, manuscript. We don't come with a instructions book that says here's what you have to do, right? And therefore, when we go through the trials of life, that's when sometimes we trip and fall, because we don't accomplish all the things that we set out to do. On the opposite side, we can do great things. We can actually overachieve the things that we were supposed to do. So it can really go either way. It's a challenge, but it's truly through incarnation or reincarnation that we actually make progress. And we're going to see on the two accounts, we're going to have an opportunity to see why certain spirits had to come back, when in theory, given their circumstances in the spiritual life, one could say, well, it doesn't sound like they would have to come back to life. But they had, and we'll see why. And this is going to, you know, confirm that to truly, you know, compensate certain things that we've done in the past, it's only coming back to this life that we can actually have an opportunity to work through those things. So we're going to go through reincarnation process in 9 easy steps. So if you don't know how to reincarnate, you're going to know. After going through this, you're going to be ready to reincarnate. And then we're going to, you know, look at a couple real life or real afterlife cases. And as I said, we see things from a material and a spiritual world. So I'm going to, you know, make that, you know, distinction as we go. So incarnation starts with discarnation, right? So to incarnate, you must first discarnate. So that physical death is obviously the first step. Then we go back to the spiritual world. And then depending on our stage of evolution, it may take, you know, it may take more or less time for us to awaken, right? To be conscious again as a spirit, and to then start thinking about, you know, what we need to learn and planning the next life. So then there is always the question about time in between lives. So people always ask, you know, how long can you remain in erraticity, I guess, or erratic stage, or in between lives? And there's no, you know, quick and fast rule. I guess I read somewhere, I'm not going to remember where, there was an average, was about 200 years. But that's, again, an average. Some spirits can incarnate immediately upon discarnation. Some spirits may stay, I don't know, 400 years in between incarnations. I think we're going to see many accounts, if you read the works of André Luiz, that normally you see, you know, 60, 70, 100 years in those cases. And you're going to see why. It's interesting because we're going to look at one account that explains why in that case it had to wait 60, 70 years for the right circumstances to develop for that spirit to come back. So then before we come back, there's planning, right? It's an important, a very important aspect, because what we do is we finished one life, we had a list of activities or objectives to accomplish. We go back to the spiritual life. We go through the, you know, perturbation period. We become aware again. We look back, and see, okay, what have I accomplished? What do I still need to accomplish? And depending on your stage of evolution, you are given the opportunity to plan. Again, according to the spirits, this is not the majority of us. It's a small percentage of spirits on earth have the opportunity to actively participate in the planning of the next incarnation. I want to believe, and without being arrogant or anything, but because we are here, I always think that, given that a few of us here decided on a bright Sunday morning to come to the center and study, that we hope to be within that group that will have an opportunity to plan our next life. Who knows? You tell me, Susanna.
I think so.
I think so too. I have to be positive, because we are making an effort to understand the spiritual life while on earth. It's a big deal. So then we plan. We say, okay, here are the things that I think I need to do next in my evolutionary path. And we don't do that alone. There's a great deal of help from our spiritual mentors and benefactors, in that case, who will help us plan what is best for us in the next life. Now, we talked about time in between lives. Interesting enough, in reading, I learned that, again, it's generally longer in more evolved spirits, right? Because the more evolved spirits, they first of all can detach themselves from Earth more quickly, and they can spend more time in the spiritual world studying and planning. The less evolved spirits, they tend to remain attached to Earth, which actually causes them to reincarnate faster. The other difference here is that the less evolved spirits, they don't have an opportunity to plan. They go through kind of a standardized incarnation planning process. And it's really the spiritual benefactors, the spiritual workers, who do the planning for them. And normally, again, because they are still in that less evolved stage, they are normally more involved with traumatic experiences, right? So they have to come back normally in an environment of hatred. And the whole process is much more difficult, because what the spirits are trying to do is reinsert a spirit that has a relationship of hatred with the future parents. So it's like trying to join two magnets with the same side or the opposite. Well, it's the same, right? She's the physicist at home as well, so I always consult her. So you try to move two magnets with the same polarity, yeah. And it's hard, right? They kind of repulse each other, and it's the same process with spirits that have a relationship of hatred. It's very hard for them to adjust. That's why we see a lot of natural abortions, for example. Those could be cases where there's so much repulsion from the spirits, from the mother towards the new spirit, or vice versa, that it materially doesn't happen. As I said, a small percentage of us have the privilege to help plan our incarnation. And what is planned? So what do you plan when you come here? Again, you plan the circumstances where you're going to reincarnate. You plan the family because you have a relationship with that family. We're going to see that in the case, well, in all cases, in the two cases that we're going to study, but we're going to see why you need to come to that particular family. You will come to a particular country. You will have a specific type of body, and that will have to do, again, with the purpose of your life. Of course, if you are going to be a great athlete, and you are going to set an example of charity or something like that. I mean, of course, you cannot come as small as me. I mean, I cannot be that's not what I came for, I'm pretty sure. But so and that has to do with diseases as well. Many of the diseases that, especially the congenital diseases, again, they are planned, right? They are planned because they have a purpose of helping us go through trials and get better, or expiate some of the imbalances that we have created in other lives. And as I said, there's a great deal of assistance. I mean, it's just amazing to read the number of spiritual benefactors that are involved in the planning process. Then there is the initial connection with the new family. As I said, if this is planned and if this is an incarnation that is of, you know, more evolved type of spirits, I mean, not pure spirits, I'm just talking about, you know, hopefully again, spirits like us who may have a little bit more enlightenment, then you know, you have an opportunity to harmonize with the new family. So before you are born, there's a huge deal of preparation where you develop this affinity again with the family, and then, you know, it makes the process so much easier. In the case of less evolved spirits, sometimes the spiritual benefactor, they have to intervene, and they have to apply treatment to the parents, because the hatred is so bad that again it can cause the conception not to occur. So they have to intervene in that case. Well, that's another interesting step here, is the miniaturization of the spirit and magnetization. So people always ask, what's the size of the spirit, right? So how can a spirit fit into a baby? And because we have to remember that the spirit still has a physical, you know, body, the perispirit. And that perispirit is going to be the matrix to the physical body. It has to shrink. It has to be the size of, you know, an ovule, right? An egg. So that's a material process even in the spiritual world. So again, as we read the accounts of missionaries of the light, for example, you can see there's a process that the spirit goes through miniaturization so that it can start attaching to the physical body. I think I went through the process and I never went back full. Like, I stopped halfway coming back. So the other thing that happens here, which you're going to see, is interesting. Again, for the more evolved spirits, there's a process of hypnosis. And it's a process assisted by spiritual doctors where we go into this deep state of meditation to internalize the goals that we have to accomplish in this life. It's a great benefit, so that, you know, those goals, those objectives can be truly internalized, and they will remain with us, and they will be inside of us, even though we go through the process of temporary memory erasure? Loss, thank you. Memory loss. Yeah, loss of memory. Then there is conception, which is also greatly assisted by the spirits. I mean, it's touching to read the process of conception from a spiritual perspective. I mean, we only think of the physical aspects of the conception, but even the sexual act in a planned reincarnation has so much assistance from the spirits that is, again, I mean, I get very touched when I read. I mean, you cry, because it's really a moment of you know, really, really high blessings. And something very special happens at this point, and you're going to see through the reincarnation planning. Again, because the body that we're going to reincarnate in plays a big role, for those spirits that are more evolved, you got to choose your body. And for that to happen, right, you have to have the right genetic combination. And you see that even though the scientists are still trying to understand what's the code, meaning what's the program that causes us to be born like we are. And again, I'm not a scientist. If anyone is, please help me here. But from what I read, even in the Genome Project, what they learn is there's still a great deal of randomness in the process. And that randomness has to do with the fact that at the time of conception, there is a specific sperm cell that is selected, because that sperm cell, together with the egg, they carry the genetic material that is needed to produce the body that we're going to incarnate in. So it's not just genetics. In those cases, in the case of less evolved spirits, they tell us that there's, you know, it's basically driven by the rules of heritage. heritage, or I guess, yeah. And then there's the initial material linkage, and that's important because as we read, it's a gradual attachment of the spiritual cells forming this or shaping the physical body, cell by cell. And the spirits tell us that the incarnation is really not complete until the baby is born. So there's this great debate as to, you know, does the fetus have a soul or not? And the spirits are clear. For those spirits that are meant to incarnate, they have a body that they're gonna inhabit, but the process of incarnation truly doesn't fully, you know, finishes until the baby is born and cries. So throughout that whole process, the attachment is happening, the miniaturization continues, the loss of memory, you know, continues until the very last moment, and that's when the full attachment happens. And there's this pregnancy, and pregnancy, again, from a spiritual perspective, and even from a psychological perspective, I mean, I think today the psychologists have made tremendous progress in understanding that there is extra cerebral memory through hypnotic regression, meaning even when the brain is not totally formed, the baby still has memories of being formed, which is a puzzle for the psychologists. Say, well, if the brain cells are still not fully formed, how can a person remember that they were in the uterus being formed? So that's a big, of course, not for us spiritists, but for the you know, common medicine is still a big puzzle, because, you know, if they consider the spiritual life, then it's easy. If not, it's going to be still a big mystery for them. But it's very important to understand that during the pregnancy is a prime opportunity for us to start, for example, you know, harmonizing, right, the environment for the arrival of that new person. So prayer and gospel at home are really, really important, always, but especially during pregnancy. And then, poof, the baby arrives. That's my picture when I was a baby. No, it is not. Okay, so what we're going to really focus on then today is the reincarnatory planning. And this is a picture that was derived from the book Missionaries of the Light. So if you read Missionaries of the Light, André Luiz tells us about, I think, the ministry of reincarnation planning. So it's a whole department in Solar of doctors and scientists dedicated to helping spirits plan their next life. And, you know, he describes pictures of different parts of the body, you know, like engineers planning, you know, how the person's body is going to work, and counselors really meeting with spirits and developing options for the plan. So we're gonna look at two case studies in Entre Dois Mundos from Divaldo Franco and Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. We're gonna look at the reincarnation process of Aurino, and then in Missionaries of the Light, the reincarnation process of, I know this is a difficult name to say in English, Sigismundo. I just call him Siggy or Ziggy. Ziggy is easier, yeah. And those are spirits who had the opportunity to plan, obviously. So they are not the compulsory, standardized, you know, type of process. They have an opportunity to plan, to participate, to discuss, and we'll see why. So let's start with Aurino's reincarnation. So Aurino was a spirit who had done a great deal of work in the Spiritism doctrine before. I think in the end of the 19th century. So he obviously did a lot to promote Spiritism, and especially in the linkage between science and Spiritism at that point. So he went back to the spiritual world, he discarnated, and now he's planning his next incarnation because he needs to continue that work of developing the spiritism on earth, which is a obviously noble, thing to do. So he's obviously, again, a spirit that has a mission more than an expiation. So in his process, again, everything is very well planned. There's little trauma or drama, right? It's more like, okay, what's the best environment for me? Who are the people that are going to support me? Because this is going to be a difficult mission to be accomplished. I need people supporting me. So he knew his future parents already from previous lives. They had been together. They are part of his spiritual family. So he was already connected to them. That's very easy. There's no hatred. There's no animosity amongst those spirits. His parents already carry the healthy biological elements that he would need, right? Because again, he would be very active, thinking, speaking, studying, and he needed to be in a healthy body, in a healthy mind. But he would also have a brother who would have mental illness, and this would help everybody, right? So everything has a purpose. So this brother would need a lot of help from him, so that would help him continue to transform and continue to exercise charity and devotion, patience. So these were virtues that he and the parents would have to continue to exercise during this life, which would be very beneficial for everybody. And we read then through the book, we read that, again, he goes through a number of treatments in preparation to the incarnation. He goes through passes therapy and spiritual reduction, as we said, the miniaturization process. He goes through hypnotherapy to really prepare him for the mission that he had to develop on earth, to be truly aware deeply inside of him and of the things that he needed to do. Because those things, that awareness, will come in handy when he faces challenges in life, obstacles in life. Those are the things that kind of speak to us and say, well, I know I have to do this, right? It's difficult. I'm going through a lot of difficulty in my life, but I feel that I must continue this work. Where does that feeling come from? It comes from this deep internalization of what you need to do in this particular life. And again, they continue to meet spiritually throughout the process, so that that affinity would grow, stronger and stronger. And we read a passage, right, at the time of conception. So we read a passage that says that the mentor, and touching Aurino's, as a spirit, crown chakra, or what do you call the frontal lobe, the mentor induced the dislocation of a powerful mental wave from Aurino, which entered the uterus of his future mother and reached a specific sperm cell. The impulse of that energy gave new speed to the sperm cell, which then won the race into conception. So it had to be that particular cell that was part of the plan. Otherwise, he would have a different body that had nothing to do with his plan. So everything is very well planned and assisted. And that specific sperm cell contained the paternal DNA with the needed elements of Aurino's physical constitution when combined with the maternal egg. Look at the little feet. So, and also, again, we read about this spiritual doctor, Germano, who is helping Aurino throughout the process, applying special, again, energy therapy in Aurino, and helping him kind of reduce in size. It's an interesting process to read. Now let's talk about the reincarnation process of Sigismundo. Sigismundo is a slightly different case, or Sigi. So Sigi, in this case, is coming to expiate or to finish unfinished businesses. So here's interesting. When you read the book, you see that Ziggy is actively working in the spiritual world. He's doing a lot of good to other spirits. He's assisting broadly within the spiritual colonies. And you would think, why does he have to come back? Well, he has to come back because there's something in his past that is unfinished. And there's no imposition from anyone other than his own conscience telling him that you have unfinished business. It's very interesting. Nobody's saying, oh, hey, you need to reincarnate. You know, it's time. It's his conscience calling him and saying, you know, you need to come back because this is not going to leave your conscience. You know, you're going to stay with that for a long time and it's never going to go away until you prove that the issue is gone. And the issue is that he had been connected to his future parents in a past life. He had an affair with another man's wife, who is Rachel, his future mother, and he murdered the husband. And then he forced her into prostitution. So he caused a lot of havoc in that family. And then after the three of them discarnated, they met in the spiritual world and they made peace. They kind of forgave each other. But it's funny, it's really never done until you can prove that you come to the physical life and you can face each other without the benefit of memory, and just your feelings, and be able to recreate those strong linkages. It's very hard. That's why it comes back to the point that the spirits are making, that there's really no way at this point for us to learn other than through reincarnation. Susanna was kind enough to send me another interesting reference from the book Workers of Life Eternal. It's chapter 5. Brother Gotuzo. Thank you. So, which I read and I found very interesting. That's, again, I'll tell it very quickly. So it's another case where André Luiz goes to a lower sphere, not the umbral, just a lower sphere, not as high as no solar, and he meets with another doctor, Gotuzo. And this doctor is helping spirits, still in between. It's closer to Earth than no solar. So you can tell that both Gotuzo and the spirits who are treated, they don't have as much awareness of the spiritual life as people or spirits in no solar. And Gotuzo is doing a lot of great work. He's helping a lot. And then, but he resents that he cannot achieve a higher sphere like no solar. And then André Luiz asks, how come? I mean, you're helping a lot of people. How come, you're still stuck here? And he says, well, and his eyes water, and he says, I'm still linked to my family. I cannot let go of my family. Even with everything I've learned, I'm still very much attached to my family. And he was worried about his wife, and he was worried about his kids. And when he had the chance to go back and meet them again, he found that, that his cousin betrayed him and married the wife because of the money, and forced the kids into business which are less than legal. He was irate, and he goes into this deep state of mental issues, goes to the umbral, and he just cannot let go of that process. He goes back, he becomes better, he continues to work as a doctor, but he says, I will never be able to get over this unless I go back and reincarnate in the family. It's funny to see, because even as we learn and we have all the teachings that we need to be able to overcome those things, still it's hard. And only through reincarnation that we can truly get over those things and say, okay, now I'm done. I'm finished with that. Now I have recreated the linkages with those spirits, and now I can move on. So thanks for the passage. So they need to meet again. So he will return to Earth as the couple's second child. But still the father nurtured tremendous hatred towards him, because remember, the father was killed by Sigismundo. So every time Sigismundo or Sigi tried to approach him at night to start building that relationship, the father would startle and wake up and had nightmares, because he sensed this spirit approaching. And even though he couldn't remember what happened in spirit, he could sense, because we know each other, we know our vibrations. So as he approached, he would get into the state of desperation. So and that was becoming a problem for the reincarnatory process. It was preventing the conception from happening. So the spiritual benefactors had to intercede. So that's where our friends come in handy, because they say, well, let us intercede, let us go there at night, let us meet with them in spirit and pray and talk to them. So the spiritual benefactors talk to his father, his to-be father, whose name is Adelino, and they kind of, clarify the purpose of that incarnation, and his heart was softened enough that he said, okay, I understand, and I will abide. So again, then Sigis goes through the same process of, spiritual reduction. There are spiritual benefactors and doctors who do a great deal of meditation and magnetization with him to help him connect with the matter again. And again, you can see a similar process to the previous one we read, where Alexandre, who is one of the spiritual benefactors, in deep concentration, follow the march of the minuscule competitors and identify the optimum one, and focus his magnetic potential on it, which gained renewed energy over the others and advanced swiftly towards the target. And Alexandre led the magnetization and miniaturization process with the help of many workers and Sigismundo's own help. So you read this passage where Alexandre says, now help us focus by visualizing the fetal form, Picture yourself returning to the uterus. Reduce yourself. So you can see that there's a great deal of participation of Ziggy himself in carrying out the process of reduction. So it's really a miracle, and we only see the material aspects of it, but there's a great deal of spiritual involvement in this whole process. I know we're getting close to the time. I can stop here and take questions. I have another section on abortion. I don't know if we should go into that or not. It's maybe 5 minutes? Okay, I'll try to boil it. So, because normally the questions that come up are, what happens with abortion then, right? And so that's why I have the next section, because I know it goes there. So, so let's talk about abortion. I mean, this is always a sensitive topic, right? It's one of those topics of great debate, obviously, in our society, and of great, I would say, sensitivity from a spiritual point of view. And we learn in Spiritism, we learn about free will, we learn about forgiveness, we learn that all of us make mistakes. So what I'm going to try to do here is what Spiritism asks us to do, which is just to shed light into the topic. It's very hard to judge, very hard. We shouldn't be judging. So the purpose is not to judge. Even though in the Spirit's book, Kardec uses the word crime. And the Spirits correct him and say, well, you can call any transgression of the natural law, of God's law, crime. So this is no different than trying to understand the natural law and what does abortion have to do with it. So that's in that light that I'm going to approach the topic, okay? So it's for us to try and understand a little bit more so that we can make choices, better choices in life. So abortion obviously has at least 3 aspects: physical, psychological, and spiritual. So I'm going to quickly talk about the 3 of them. Again, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, so forgive my ignorance. I just did some research which I found interesting and I wanted to share with you. So from physical consequences, even doctors agree it's a violent act, any way you look at it, because there's no easy way to carry out an abortion. If you read about it, it's ugly, and you have to squeeze the baby, and it's difficult. I mean, it's not an easy process, even from a physical point of view. So it's a difficult choice to make. From a psychological consequence, it's interesting because there's great debate about, well, what if it's an abortion because of rape, right? What if it's an abortion because the fetus is malformed? We know it's a problem, and we know that that child's going to be born with a defect. So what do we do? And from a psychological consequence, thinking about rape, a couple interesting data points to say that clearly it leaves an emotional trauma memory. And interesting enough, and there's a work done by Nicole Cooley, there's a book called Into the Light, Rape, Abortion, and the Truth That Set Me Free. It's an interesting book. What she concludes through research is that in many cases of rape followed by abortion, the traumatic memory that stays with the person throughout life is that of the abortion and not of the rape. So the abortion trauma in the mother's head is much stronger than the trauma of the rape itself. Something for us to think about, right? When we think that we are solving a problem by creating another problem. And the other, I think, interesting work, and that's the second reference there, is that contrary to popular belief, the vast majority of women victimized by rape choose to carry pregnancy to term. So it's actually only a small portion that decide to commit abortion, which means that, again, there's still, you know, deep inside, I think, this question around why did this happen, right? And from a spiritual point of view, again, as we saw, there's a great deal of work involved in reincarnation. I know sometimes the circumstances can be very difficult, right, in which the person is going to incarnate. But as we learn, and the spirits are very clear, incarnation is the only true way for us to make progress in life. As difficult as life is, and as much as we think that, hey, we're going to be free once we move out of this physical life, which is true, still the physical life is the opportunity for us to accomplish all the advancements that we need to accomplish. So the other thing is there's a long queue. It's a long, I mean, that's what the spirits tell us. There's a long list of people who are trying to come back, and there's not enough incarnations, right? We see in Solar, I mean, when you read the Spirits book, it's interesting. So Kardec asks, you know, what's the feeling? What do we feel before coming back to life? I mean, is it easier to discarnate or to incarnate? And it seems to be easier to discarnate than to incarnate, because incarnation carries a great deal of uncertainty. Discarnation doesn't. We know that once we are done with this life, we know we're going to go back to the spiritual life, and we know more or less through all the nice books that Andrea Luis left us that you know, we know more or less what we're gonna face. In incarnation, there's a great deal of uncertainty because we have the plan and we have all the circumstances which can cause the plan to be changed. So the spirit has a lot of anxiety before the spirit incarnates. So still, it's the only way we can accomplish, you know, what we need to do. So the only thing I want to say about abortion is that it causes all this preparatory labor to have been in vain. It causes the whole thing to start again. And if the spirit needs to incarnate, it's going to have to incarnate. And if you needed to meet with that spirit, you're going to meet with that spirit. There's no way around it. There's going to be some circumstance that will cause the two of you to meet again. And now you have an additional task, which is to help compensate for all the rework that's going to have to be done because the preparation was in vain. And again, only God can give life. I mean, no one has invented a way to give life. So still the laws of God know when life should be taken. And there are true miracles. I mean, even scientists are pointing out that careful with the things we are saying, that, hey, you know, the baby doesn't have life, or, you know, it's not until a certain month. So this is a 5-month-old fetus. You can look at him, he's a baby. And interesting enough, this is a picture of a baby that was being operated in intrauterus, and that happened in the Vanderbilt University in Nashville. The baby had spinal bifida, or bifida, and that's normally a condition that in many cases doctors recommend abortion, and because there's a problem in the spinal the spinal cord, or the closing of that tube. And this is a baby being operated, and when the doctor was operating him, the baby reaches out and grabs the finger of the doctor. So he's only 5 months old, and who can say there's no life in that baby and there's no spirit in that baby, right? So it was very touching. And this is a little neonate. I think it's also 6 or 5 month old neonate. Look how small. Still, it's a person, it's a spirit. So I want to leave you with a few messages here. So we need to cherish the gift of life, right? First of all, we are so blessed to be here today, where we are studying these things, being made aware of these things, being better prepared to really take advantage of the incarnation that we were given. So it's a blessing, it's an opportunity, it's really, and it doesn't matter how old we are. Tomorrow is the next day, and we always have an opportunity to restart and do something that we said, you know what, it's time for me to do it. I've waited this long, but I need to do it, and I'll do it. So every day we have that opportunity while incarnated on earth. So let's really rejoice life. Also, let's not forget about our parents. Whether they are alive or not, they were the ones who made the opportunity real for us, and they could have chosen many other options, and they chose to allow us to be here. So I thank my parents, because otherwise potentially I would still be in the queue waiting for an opportunity to come back. And I'm very glad that they didn't, and I can be here talking to you today. So as Einstein said, there are two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle, and everything is a little miracle. We know there are no miracles, but everything is special, every little moment. So thank you very much.